Hey, good morning. We're so glad you to join us. My name is Scott Dawson, and for over 30 years, I've been privileged to be able to come alongside the local church in presenting the gospel. And during these uncertain times, we've just kind of asked our team to go out and talk to folks and to not really come with looking for a handout, but to come with our hand out to say, what can we do to come along beside you? And we kept hearing over and over again, these are uncertain times. This is a moment that none of us have ever experienced before. And so I got it with some good friends that you're going to hear from today about leading during difficult times. And so there's an Irish proverb that says the best thing you can do for your friends is introduce them to your friends. And one of my friends, Dr. Ted Traylor in Pensacola, Florida, pastor of the Olive Baptist Church, introduced me to the guy you're going to hear today, Andy Andrews. And so I've kind of asked Ted if he would just open us up and open us up in not only a words of welcome, but open us up in prayer. And then after that, we'll introduce Andy, and then we'll get right into the meat of this hour. So thanks for joining.
Thank you, Scott. Joy to come be a part anytime I be with my good friends. It's wonderful, and love Andy, and we've known each other for several years, living here on the Gulf Coast now. Grateful to God for him. Remember the first time I ever had him in a group of pastors to speak, the rule was that you could not sell any product. And so he went through his whole presentation, 90 minutes or so, and then he rolls out all of these invitations to buy books. And I'm like dying over there. I'm just thinking, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. As soon as I get this, I'm going to kill him. And then he gave all of us every book and stuff that he had, every recording, and my sweat dried up and I was in good shape, but he had killed me that particular day. And I can say this because all his speaking engagements have been canceled. He's not going to give you anything today on this broadcast. All right. So, hey, Andy, I love you. I thank God for you and for your friendship, for you and your sweet family. And Scott, thanks for putting this together. I want to pray for us, and then you introduce our dear friend to us this day. Father, I give you praise and glory today. There are a lot of hurting people in this time with this coronavirus, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of depression, difficulty. But Father, I thank you that Jesus today is not out walking around the throne wondering what he's going to do. Thank you that you are enthroned, in charge, and that you are taking care of your people and your church. And I pray today that you'll send a great word of encouragement to all of us as we've gathered here together. Thank you for Scott Dawson for all he does, especially for pastors and staffers. And thank you for Andy and that positive good word that he always has for us. Bless us today, and I pray we'll have ears to hear what the Spirit would speak to us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks, Pastor Ted. We have over 200 of us that have gathered across the country. And again, in these uncertain times, he probably doesn't need an introduction, but just for formality's sake, his name is Andy Andrews. He's a New York Times best-selling author. He's been known to most of us as the professional noticer. His books have sold over 3 million, but sports teams have used him, corporations have used him, organizations have used him to just get his keen insight for what he can kind of glean from certain aspects of your business, your company, or your church. And so when we started thinking about leading through difficult times, there was none other than Andy Andrews that would be able to speak with us. So today what we're going to do is you're going to hear about a 30-minute message challenge from Andy, and then we're going to be able to come back and do some Q&A. So there, during this Zoom webinar, the bottom of your screen, you should have a place where you can have Q&A, and you shoot those questions to us. And then as time permits, because we've got this kind of narrowed down to an hour for this morning, we'll kind of ask Andy some questions. And then at the end, we'll hear from Dr. Michael Catt from Albany, Georgia, as he prays over us and closes us out this morning. So I hope you have your notebook. I've got mine, my pen, and my coffee. And let's listen today to none other than Andy Andrews. Andy, welcome. We're glad you're here. It's all yours.
Thank you, buddy. I got to tell you guys that it's very odd for me to be with Scott and Ted and Michael, and I'm the one speaking. Something is wrong with this picture. But I am honored to be here with you guys. And and excited to be with them too. You know, leadership during difficult times it's a different animal. This is not just regular leadership. You know, you had that difficult times or that crisis word in there, and it turns into a whole different thing. And it's not really that you need a different style of leadership when a crisis is happening. It's just that everything that we didn't understand about true leadership will bubble to the surface during times like these and can become a hindrance if you're not digging in and getting to the bottom of the pool on what leadership really is and what it can be in your life. You know, I work with a lot of coaches, and it's cool for me to see what people approach their potential in life, and what people don't, and how their thinking is wrapped around both of those destinations. And it is certainly true that people who compare themselves with others, people who learn leadership by only listening to tapes or only reading books, people like that can only get so far, because you can only get, you know, where somebody else has gotten. But true leadership, really getting out there, will lead you in some different areas of understanding. And so when we're talking about true leadership, you have the opportunity to learn it and make it work during times like these. You know, I do, just like you, I keep hearing people say, you know, these are uncertain times, and they are. But, you know, so is December and last September. I mean, we have always lived in uncertain times. And so there is a way to view what is going on so that your leadership really can be based on truth, and people sense that. Now, I want to give you a very short little definition. I had a time that I'd done a television show in New York, and got home, and the very next day my cell phone rang, and it said blocked caller. And at that time, the only two people that had my number that said blocked caller was Nancy Lopez and Bill Gaither. And I liked both of them, so I answered. But it was neither of them. It was the wife of a Supreme Court justice, and she was not happy with me. And she told me, she said, I saw you yesterday on TV, and I'm just very disappointed. And I'm like, why? What did I do? I'm trying to think, what did I do? And she said, well, you had him right where you wanted him. And she said, and my husband and I have read your books for years, and we feel like we know how you think. And you had him right there, and you didn't go for it, and you didn't take him down. You didn't tell you. And if we don't tell these people what they better understand and what they better think, and she just went on and on. And so finally, when she took a breath, I said, hang on just a second. I said, you're right. I did not take him down. And, but that was on purpose. And would you like to know why? And she said, yes, I would really like to know why. I said, well, it has to do with leadership. It has to do with leadership and the vacuum that we see in our country. And she said, we have a vacuum leadership. I said, I'm not saying we don't have leaders. I'm saying there's more to understand about leadership, especially from the leaders that we have in our country that seem to kind of fight back and forth a lot. And, there was a time when it's certainly 25, 30 years ago when the party, the president's party and the other party, they would duke it out on television and then go out to dinner with their families together. But, we have a hard time seeing any of these people having dinner together. And so what passes for leadership tends to be, you get control and then you change everything the other people did. And then a few years later, somebody else takes control. They change everything somebody else did. And so we're not really following to a great degree. And if nobody's following, there isn't a lot of leadership going on. See, leadership, and this is what I told her, the essence of leadership is influence. That's the essence of it. And the essence of influence is agreement. You can't lead people who fundamentally disagree with you. And we don't follow somebody that we disagree with. So there has to be agreement for leadership to take place. And of course she said, well, there's nothing we agree on anymore. I said, well, that would be pretty sad. I said, but I think there are some things we agree on. And she said, well, I'd like to hear what they are. I said, well, you go out on the street and ask anybody. I don't care what color they are, what age they are, you know, where they worship or don't. You know, and if you ask them, do you want the best for your children? They'll say yes. If we say, do you think that our politicians and leaders should be able to lie to us? Is that okay? Or should they have to tell us the truth? And everybody says, oh, they should tell us the truth. Curiously, even if they're lying about it. But that's the agreement. You've got something to go on. And she said to me then, she said, well, you know, now you got to determine what is best. You know, now you got to define what is best. I said, exactly right. That's exactly right. And we haven't, have we? She said, well, I think I know. I said, okay, all right, that's good. But, you know, you always want to remember what Mark Twain said. Mark Twain said, it ain't the things you don't know that'll get you. It's the things you know for absolutely sure that can get you in trouble. And I think the point he was making then was you do have to keep trying to get to the foundation, because if we're wanting the best, if you and I disagree on many things, but we both agree we want the best for our children, well, the best is one thing. I mean, there can be different categories, but we're not talking among the best or some of the best of all time. We're talking about the best. See, the best is like the truth. It's one thing. The truth is a foundation, right? That's the foundation. And it's curious to me that you can know the truth and never accomplish the best. However, you can never accomplish the best without knowing the truth. And both of those things are foundational. Both of them go together. So the essence of leadership is influence, and the essence of influence is agreement. To communicate in a way that people have an opportunity to follow. Now, I want to say this. There is, and this may sound like an odd thing to say, but I work with tons of companies and teams, and when somebody asks what I do, if I'm in that work situation and they say, okay, so what are we doing? What are you going to teach us? And my answer is, I help people compete in a way the competition doesn't recognize that a game is even going on. That's what I do. And I wanted you guys to know that there is an opportunity to compete during this crisis. In fact, the longer the crisis goes on, the greater the opportunity will be. Now, I'm going to explain that in a second, but I can kind of hear you going, well, I mean, look at what's going on. Come on, dude. You know, you need to be real about this and look at what's going on. And this is, if there was ever a time to panic, this is it. Well, I always remember, a Bible verse that has been great for me over and over again is Psalm 125:1. Those who trust in the Lord are steady as Mount Zion, unmoved by any circumstance. All right, think about that. Those who trust in the Lord are steady as Mount Zion, unmoved by any circumstance. You know that word, circumstance. always makes me think of Zig Ziglar. And I know you guys remember who Zig is, but the reason I think of him is because he had this little thing he would do. And he would say, I went up to this guy the other day and I said, how you doing? And he said, well, under the circumstances. And I said, under the circumstances, what are you doing under there? I always remember. And because I got this visual of circumstances being kind of like the lid on a jar. And, we're just like in this jar and somebody has fastened this circumstances lid over us and there's no way to get out. But the answer, of course, goes right back. Psalm 125:1, those who trust in the Lord are steady as Mount Zion, unmoved by any circumstance. Okay, so what are we competing for? I am aware, though I'm not technically like Scott or Michael or Ted, as far as like being a preacher or whatever. I do feel like I have some insight to it. My dad was a minister and I grew up in that, and we're still, so I understand that there may be a little consternation when I say you have an opportunity to compete. And I understand you might be thinking a little bit like, no, wait a minute, what are we competing for? We're not competing. Oh, yes, we are. We are competing for the hearts and minds of a nation. Always. We're always, or we should be. We should have been doing this before this coronavirus came along. Competing for the hearts and minds of a nation. If we're to follow the Great Commission and bring others into the presence and a relationship with Jesus Christ, that's their hearts and minds, man. That's where we have to be. And so now you think, well, how do we compete? Right now, we compete with leadership. So I'm not just saying that we're, competing that your church, can gain new members. And when it goes back to normal, you got twice as many people there, even though I expect that to happen with a lot of pastors and a lot of churches. And I'm not, that is a reality. Okay. But we're also competing with the people who are speaking out against Jesus, or the people who have always, traditionally gone against what we stand for and who we serve. And so in a way right now, I have a client that I call him a car czar because he has a bunch of automobile dealerships. And I had a meeting kind of like this with him last week. And I told him, I said, look, I said, nobody in a leadership position should deny the reality of what's happening, but we should deny the finality of what is happening. Things change, all right? Things are going to change. And so right now, as a leader, we want to show calm. We want to have fun to show that calm. And we want to create value. Value is how we will compete. And I told the car guy, I said, look, right now, you're not selling any cars. And neither is any of your competition. And when this started, there was a way to run a car business. There was a way. I mean, you have a certain number of radio commercials, a social media person, you have, television commercials. There's a way that it's done. There's a way that the competition is done. And it's a game. There are rules, and it's a game. And so at a time like this, you're not selling any cars and they're not selling any cars. But there is coming a time when you're going to sell cars again. And I hope that for his car dealerships, and he's a very strong Christian guy, and I said, I hope, for the sake of your car dealerships and for the sake of Jesus Christ, I hope we're not treating this like a Monopoly game. A Monopoly game can go forever. You're just like, oh my gosh, how long is this going to last? And we've all probably been involved in Monopoly games where we said, okay, we got to go, and we're just going to have to pick this up tomorrow. So leave the board where it is. Nobody touch anything. Just everybody's money, houses, hotels stays the same. Okay, it's your turn when we get back. And then, a day or two later, we come back and everything is the same, and we start again. I hope it's not going to be like that. We can make sure that it is not like that. I said, buddy, when people start buying cars again, if, while everybody else quit playing, they left the game, they went and panicked somewhere, and they didn't continue to keep in touch. They didn't continue to encourage. They didn't continue to teach. They didn't continue to learn, and they didn't create value for potential customers. But if you kept doing all that during this time, there's coming a day when we're going to sell cars again. But the game will have changed because you will have provided so much value for people. No longer will a certain number of people go to this car dealership and get a price and then go to this one, then go to another, and then tell them what they got. They're not going to do that anymore. They're just going to buy them from you. They're just going to go to you because you're the guy who led them through the crisis. You and I know you can't just say, okay, you're a leader and have them be a leader. Sometimes we say you're a leader and really they're a manager and maybe not even a very good one at that. But leadership is something you have to understand to implement. Leadership is influence, and the essence of influence is agreement. And so to be able to help people understand is huge. To understand. See, there are so many things that are true and yet not the truth. And so a lot of times we will have an answer that we've stopped at, that we found the answer to that, and that's true. Now, there's probably more to it, but we just, it's working and we've got some results. And so we don't continue to think through and ask why and go to the bottom of the pool and find the foundation of this. And so we want the truth. We want to understand in a way that we can explain. Because a leader will create the narrative. A real leader during a crisis situation, during difficult times, a real leader will create the narrative that people follow. And just understand that in the absence of a narrative, in the absence of explanations from their leader, in the absence of a narrative, people come up with their own ideas. People think way off the pathway, and they can get in trouble. And so this idea of leading the narrative is huge. There's, we've all heard some people see the glass half full, some people see the glass half empty. And the truth is, the bottom of the pool on that is it's really neither, because however much water's in the glass, that's just how much water there is. It's not really half full or half empty. And I know you say, yeah, right, but it's your perspective. That's exactly right. It is. It's your perspective. It's how it, but if I said, well, what do you mean it's your perspective? A lot of people would say, well, it's how you see the glass. It's, how you see. Do you see it half empty or do you see it half full? It's how you see it. And that's an answer that is true but not the truth. It is true that your perspective of that, it is true that it is how you see it, whether you see it half full or half empty. But the truth is, it's how you choose to see it. See, perspective is an interpretation. Perspective is how you choose to see something. Don't mistake the difference in perception and perspective. Perception, what you perceive, is a now thing. It's what you perceive to be going on right now. But your perspective takes into account your perception and adds future thought to it. Your perspective is how you perceive something and what that's going to mean. What direction are we going to move because of that? This is why perspective, I wrote a book called The Noticer, and people call me the noticer now, because all I'm trying to do is to notice real, true little things. And so the truth about perspective is that perspective brings calm. And calm leads to clear thinking, and clear thinking yields ideas. And from ideas, we get the answers from the Lord in his perfect timing. There is a chapter 13 in a book I did called The Little Things. And I've probably written some stuff that's better, but I don't know that I have written anything that's more important to help people in a situation where they have to lead effectively. And chapter 13 in The Little Things is an explanation of change. And it took me years and years to try to figure out exactly what was going on, because as I would go to speak for companies, they'd say, well, talk to them about change because we got some real changes happening. Or, well, you need to talk about change because it isn't like it was last year. Things are, or you need to talk about change because we're about to embark on some changes. Or it's just, but they would always ask, and then I'd come back 18 months later and they'd ask me to talk about change again. I'm thinking, that didn't work very well, did it? And so I thought, man, there's got to be something wrong going on. How could everybody be so aware of change and how much things have to change and how much things do change, and yet be totally powerless to direct it? Okay. And so what I finally figured out is this thing about some things being true but not being the truth. There are three things about change that our society believes. That there are three things that our society puts in as the three pillars of change. And what are the odds that all three of these would be, not the truth? I mean, they work enough at the time for people who have gotten this in their mind. But the three things are, number one, people say change takes time. It takes time to change. Change is a process. It takes time. No, not really. Change happens in a heartbeat, real change. Now, it may take time to prepare to change. It may take time to figure out whether or not you want to change, or, it may take a few years to get to the point where with your family, you go, we are never doing Thanksgiving with those cousins ever again. But when the change happens, it's immediate. Accepting Christ as your personal Savior is not a process, man. I mean, when you accept Christ, it comes into your heart. That's a heartbeat that happens. So change doesn't necessarily take a lot of time. The other thing people say is that change, they got to want it. They probably need to have a deep desire for change if a true and lasting change is to take place. And that's not really true either, because we could sit around and give each other tons of stories about somebody who, or ourselves. How many times have you been in a situation and you're bopping merrily along and everything seems absolutely fine, and all of a sudden you get some new information? and you turn around and do a 180 and head the other direction, and you never look back over your shoulder. And that change not only happened in a heartbeat, you weren't looking for it. You didn't go out the door today saying, today I'm going to have a major change in my life. But whatever story you can come up with, the truth is that change happens in a heartbeat, and that you don't even have to have a deep desire for things to change significantly, right? And then the third one is that rock bottom thing. It's, oh, well, we thought he was at rock bottom, but, he obviously, and he probably thought he was too, but until he really is at rock bottom, he's not going to change. And we've heard this, and that's not necessarily true either, because, and we know this because how many times have you been around a family, or maybe your family, or somebody that they were in rehab and out of rehab and in rehab and out of rehab and in rehab and out of rehab. And finally the family just said, we can't do this anymore. We can't afford it. I don't know what you're going to do, but you're going to have to somehow take care of this because we can't do this anymore. And then you don't see them for a few years, and then you run into them and they're fine. They're happily married. They're employed. They're just doing great. And we go, wow, I'm so happy for you and congratulations. Can I ask you what happened? And, the answer is always something like, well, I was reading this book and I read this part that said, or, well, I was watching TV and I heard this lady say, or, well, I was talking to a friend and he told me that, and whatever it was. And then I went home, I flushed all the pills down the toilet. I poured the liquor down the sink, and I haven't wanted any more ever since. And you hear this and you go, really? After all you put us through, and then somebody says something, but we do see those things happen. We see that happen. And so it just lets us know that you don't really have to be at rock bottom to change. Now, here's the point. There are two things. I've researched this for years. I've asked this question of people for years. And if you can come up with anything other than these two things that have to be there for true and lasting change to happen, I would love to know. I would love to hear it, because so far thousands of people have not been able to come up with anything that makes more sense than these two things. There are two things that have to be in place for every change. And I'm talking about nationally, in your family, with your church, with your community, your neighborhood. The two things, very simple. One is, what's in it for me? Now, I'm not saying this in like a greedy way. I'm saying, okay, we've been doing it this way for a long time, and now you want us to do it this way. And so if we do it this way, how does that affect me and my family? I mean, even if they don't say it to you, they're thinking about it. It's human nature. There's nothing wrong with it, but that is a change agent. That's one of two. What's in it for me? How does this affect me? Right? And the second one is proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I'm not talking about a mathematical proof. I'm talking about an explanation that somebody would hear and they would have this kind of reaction. Well, that makes perfect sense. I never thought of that. I don't guess I'll ever think of it any other way again. Let me tell you something. When proof beyond a reasonable doubt, when that just makes sense thing, when proof beyond a reasonable doubt collides with what's in it for them, they will change and never look back. Now, how does this help you? One thing we must understand is that this refers to every change in a life. They're not buying your product. We want them to buy your product. That means they have to change. So before they buy your product, they're going to have to figure out what's in it for them and proof beyond a reasonable doubt. And then, they're not voting like you want them to vote. Okay, well, if you could somehow present what's in it for them and proof beyond a reasonable doubt in a way that makes sense, because proof beyond a reasonable doubt, you're going to have to communicate something, not tell them, right? And so, but if we can get those two things, you got a teenager that you're wanting different behavior from, that means they have to change. This is why things like, because I said so, because I'm your father, as long as you live under my roof, that's why these things don't matter. There's nothing in it for them. They don't work. I didn't mean they don't matter, but I guess if they don't work, they really don't matter. If we want people to accept Jesus as their personal Savior, if they can't figure out what's in it for them, and there's no proof beyond a reasonable doubt that it's valuable, then they're not going to change. But when we know those two agents of change, we know several things. We know that you're not going to get people to come to church or to accept Christ by saying, well, you really need Jesus in your life. You need him. He'll change your life. I mean, that is a true statement, but it doesn't carry the day with them, because we have to communicate what's in it for them. And we really do have to know what's in it for them to be able to provide proof beyond a reasonable doubt. There are so many proofs in Proverbs to be able to understand and be able to help people with their money, with their fear, with their children, with their marriage. There's so many things, and we don't even have to refer to, because they've already decided what they don't want to listen to, what they will, or who you are. And if we can present proof in ways that allows us to create value in their life during this time, this could be the time of a great awakening. I want to leave you with this. There's a song. I've always kind of liked this song, but Gloria Gaither and a lady named Dottie Rambo wrote this song, and I've always liked this song. If you want to see a great version of it, go on YouTube and look at The Isaacs, Isaacs, The Isaacs. And the name of the song is something like "Who Holds Tomorrow." But here's a verse and the chorus of this. And I want you to hear these words, because this is such a great mantra for where we are now. Here it is. I don't know about tomorrow. I just live from day to day. I don't borrow from its sunshine, for its sky may turn to gray. I don't worry for the future, for I know what Jesus said. And today I'll walk beside him, for he knows what is ahead. Many things about tomorrow I don't seem to understand, but I know who holds the future, and I know who holds my hand. Thank you, guys. Scott?
All right, Andy, thank you so much. My goodness, we want to get back to you in just a second. Like we told you before, there's going to be a time of question and answer. We've already got several of them coming in. I would say, as we're transitioning into that Q&A, Andy, I appreciate your time. I know you've got a lot of stuff going on, and you've got wisdomharbor.com where people can go on a daily basis. You've got tons of resources for us there. I would say, according to Amazon, they're not going to be selling books right now because they're doing daily staples for that warehouse shipments. But they can always get your books at andyandrews.com. And for me, you have so many of them. The Noticer, How to Kill 11 Million People. And the one bottom of the pool is been so, it's almost like been one of my go-tos during this time, how something can be true and not the truth. And so as we're getting to the Q&A, I'm going to bring you back up on the screen. The first one, this is a question from a businessman. He says, how do you even start to lead a team of people virtually when you're used to being in the office together on a daily basis?
Now, what's his name, Scott? First name?
Bob.
Bob, let me just tell you this. I don't feel sorry for you at all because, I used to work as a comedian, and you think that it's hard for you to create that virtual connection. I'm used to getting somebody laughing here, and I can't hear any of you people. And so, listen, what you want to do, and I'm not making fun of this because I understand it's a crazy situation, but what you want to do is get good at looking into that camera and looking into the hearts and minds of the people that are there, and treat this like a one-on-one conversation. I mean, just have the conversation like you would. Don't worry about pauses, because a lot of times pauses can show that you're thinking and that you really do care. And the people during this time who shift with this, it's going to be, listen, Bob, throughout history, and I don't mean just world history, I mean your personal history and my personal history, how many times have we had things that we just fought against, and we if there was any possible way, we were not going to let it happen, and we would have never, and then it happened, and then a year later, we were sitting around and we said, wow, isn't it amazing how much we did not want that to happen, and now look at where we are, because if that hadn't happened, we wouldn't be here. Look, you have an opportunity to connect with people, Bob, who were never, I know that you're used to being live in front of people, but you now have the opportunity to connect with people who were never going to walk into your building.
All right. Andy,
And
here's
so,
another one
yeah.
from Jacob. He says, you said the essence of leadership is influence, and influence is agreement. He said, I'm dealing with a group that is not in agreement, that is not in disagreement, but they're apathetic. How do we move from apathy to agreement?
Well, at some point, if you're dealing with a group, if that group is like a congregation, then I got to say, you're going to have to become very interesting. You're going to have to talk about stuff nobody expects you to talk about. Okay. But if you're talking about a committee, then you may think about getting a new committee. Or, I was working with one of my clients yesterday, and there is a committee in between this person and all the people who need to know. And that committee was like costing time and costing dissension. And, they saw themselves as you talk to us and then we will communicate to everybody else. But of course they would always put their spin on it. And so the answer is very simple. A lot of this, when you're talking about moving from apathy to agreement, think parenting. Okay. Because you can't make a kid do anything, especially a teenager. You can't make them, but you and I both know you can make them want to with how it is presented. And part of that presentation, Jacob, is going to be the questions you ask. Right now, they may not be as apathetic as they are scared to death and trying to act cool. And it comes across as apathy. And so questions will bring about answers. The quality of your questions will determine the quality of your answers. And they are, whether they say it or not, they're looking for answers. And so as much perspective as you can give and as much as you can bring them through this with the questions you ask, and you keep asking questions until you get to the answer that they need. And then they're the ones who came up with that. But again, if it's a committee, you need to be communicating with everybody. Don't expect that that committee, especially if you know how they feel right now, that is how your message will be spent. You need to communicate with everybody. And you know, I'm going to get on a Facebook Live thing this afternoon, and we do things that we wouldn't normally do, but we communicate. You know what you tell people, Jacob, when somebody, you know, they're behind on their payments or something. You know, I always say to somebody like that, I said, just communicate. Just communicate. If you communicate, it'll be fine. But if you go dark on them, you know, in the absence of a narrative, they're going to come up with their own. So all you need to do is communicate, but you're going to have to do it much more than usual because they're not going to see you in the grocery store right now. They're not going to see you at the car wash. They're not going to see you in the pulpit every Sunday. Figure out a way to make things very cool. Like, wow, if we weren't having this situation, we wouldn't be getting this. You know what I think a great message would be? Now, this is something, I just happened to think of this. This would strike me. If I saw somebody was going to preach on this, I would go, yeah, I'm curious. What would Jesus say about COVID-19? What would he say about it? Now, I don't know the answer to that. Okay, but I know that's a great question. And I know it's one you can go on. I think maybe, you know, when I said you got to be really interesting a few minutes ago, do research, do crazy research, go down rabbit trails on the internet. You know, if I was going to say, what would Jesus say about COVID-19? First thing I'd do is I would Google, you know, what diseases were going on during Jesus's time. You know, I mean, what happened to people then? What did he say about it then? And you can make connections and you can come up with a message that people will pass around and go crazy. But just remember that message always has to deal with perspective, and that perspective brings calm. Calm leads to clear thinking. Clear thinking uses ideas, and from ideas we get those answers.
Wow. Okay. Here's another one, and this one chose to remain anonymous. He or she says, we keep hearing unprecedented in this situation. Is this unprecedented in the context of history, or how is it unprecedented in the context of history?
That's a great question. And I think, you know, Scott, you and I talked about this a little yesterday. It's unprecedented in the fact that in our lifetimes, nobody has reacted to something this way. Now, I'll tell you, I've got my phone here, and I want to Google something. I'm going to Google death by flu 2019. USA. Now this is kind of how I do research, right? So I'm just saying, all right. So if you look at the deaths of flu, according to the CDC, each year. Okay, well, we're in March, and 59,000 people have died of the flu. There's a couple 100,000 people that die of the flu every year. And now this is just perspective. Okay, I'm not telling you this is not dangerous or anything. I'm just saying this is perspective. This is the answer to your unprecedented question. They're announcing now, the news is announcing now that that there could be up to 200,000 people die from this in America. And I'm not making light of this or I'm not making light of this at all. But in reality, we have that or more every year from the flu. I think there is some perspective that gives us great hope. I think that when people say unprecedented, that's a fear word. That's just what I think. All right. Now, I got to tell you, I'm not a person who gets up every morning and goes to the news. All right. Because I know how the news works. I know how this works. You know, I did a thing on Good Morning America one time with Robin Roberts. And when Robin and I got through, the producer came up to me and the producer said, "That was awesome. That was awesome. What else do you have? What other topics could we get you on here to talk about?" And I said, "You know what? I would love to talk about parenting because I've got some stuff that would work 100% of the time. If you understand it, it'll work 100% of the time." And the producer went, "Hey, have you got anything that like two of our hosts could agree with and two of them could disagree with? That's what we're really looking for." I said, "So you're not looking for something that will help people 100% of the time?" And the producer said, "No." I mean, you know, I mean, they get higher ratings during disasters. And so higher ratings mean more money. And doesn't that just seem logical that it would pay them to use words that scare people? I mean, we hear about a 2% death rate over and over and over again with this, but nobody ever says a 98% survival rate. So we want to have clear thinking with perspective. It's dangerous. Yes. It's dangerous and unprecedented because it's a new strain of something, but we have a history of creating vaccines. We've done polio, tetanus, typhoid, diphtheria, measles, mumps, chicken pox, smallpox. Smallpox in the last 100 years of its existence, smallpox killed 500 million people. But in 1980, the World Health Organization, because of the vaccine, declared smallpox eradicated. So the answer of, is this unprecedented? Yes and no.
All right, Andy, one final, we've got several of them we could continue on with. You've piqued interest among a lot of folks and want to thank everybody for being part of this and staying with us. The final question is, where do you go to find material that challenges you to personally grow?
Well, to find material that challenges me, I'm in one of those places right now, because anytime I'm around Scott, anytime I'm around Michael Catt, anytime I'm around Ted Traylor, these people challenge me. They challenge my thinking, and that's what I want. I figured out a long time ago, I don't want to ask people. I don't want to say, "Hey, you have permission, to tell me if you see something wrong." I just want you to know you have permission to tell me. If you sense that I'm going down the wrong path, you have permission. That it's too important for me to just give somebody the permission. I say, "Look, I'm not giving you permission to tell me the truth. I'm begging you. I'm begging you. I know it might be uncomfortable, but you have to. If you love me, if you love my family, if you want the best for my life, I'm begging you, please tell me the truth." You are that person. And the other thing is to read. Get an Audible account, have a book going, a real book going with a highlighter, and have something else going in your ear when you're driving. I'm just saying, you don't have to know the news, because if it gets bad enough, somebody's going to tell you. And that's all anybody's talking about anyway, right? And so just make sure that you are calm and that you do have the proper perspective. And then when you look into that camera, you will be able to communicate that to people. And when this is over, once again, we will see how God has used it.
Andy, again, I want to thank you for your time. You have wisdomharbor.com. You have your podcast that we can all look on anywhere you get your podcasts, where you subscribe to, but also your books, how God has used those in my own life and in Michael's life and Ted's life and millions of others. I just challenge everyone, if you have not read Andy, go ahead now and go to andyandrews.com and pick up a couple of them. What else are you going to do, right? I mean, this is a time to learn and to grow and to make yourself better. So
and connect with your family. Connect with your family. Man, read to them. Turn off the TV. Just put the phones away for a little bit and read to them. I did a video. I think it's on Wisdom Harbor. It's The Kid Who Changed the World. And it's for kids, obviously, but the illustrations are there. And it has a curriculum attached for K-5 through second grade. And the curriculum is a lot of questions that parents could create conversations at the dinner table about this idea of a kid changing the world. And just remember, during this time, you're not lacking money. You're not lacking time. You're only lacking an idea to change everything for everybody.
Amen. I'm going to bring in now Dr. Michael Catt from Albany, Georgia. He's pastoring Sherwood Baptist, but Albany has been in the news here recently. My goodness, you guys have gone through the hurricane last year, flooding, and now there are reports out that you're per capita, the fourth hot spot in America. And Michael, you're in the midst of this right now, of leading during difficult times. And I wanted you to just kind of give us the final words and to pray for all of us, as we're definitely praying for you, my brother, and everything that's going on in Albany. So I'm going to turn it over to you, and I'll let you close this out. Thank you guys so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, thanks, Scott. Thanks, Andy and Ted. And I would encourage you to go to andyandrews.com and order the books. Every time he comes out with a book, I buy dozens of copies and give to our staff and to our leadership team, because I want them to read good authors. And there's a lot of fluff out there, but then there's stuff that sticks. And so Andy's one of those guys for me. And he didn't ask me to say that. I don't make any money off of doing that. I just know that he's a thinker at the forefront of thinking, not just in a crisis, but at all times. Perspective for us is, yes, we are number 4, not just in America, but we are number 4 in the world. There's China, then there's this northern part of Italy, then New York City, then Albany, Georgia, and then New Orleans. It was created by some churches that held funerals, people hugging and loving each other. And some folks left those funerals, and 3 people died who attended those funerals. And it spread even to a person who attended that funeral, went home to Louisiana, got sick, and died. So perspective is, pay attention to the things that are helping others. We want to help others. So we're making masks for our hospital. We are delivering snack bags to our hospital workers who are putting in long hours and on the front lines of dealing with this. Find ways to change the conversation. I told our church, if it doesn't edify, don't post it. This is not a time to use social media for griping and complaining and moaning about being locked in. Think about Anne Frank and how long she stayed locked in before the Germans finally found her. I mean, this is a perspective moment. And the way you change the perspective in a city is when the saints become salt and light and deal with the decay and with the darkness. The way that you change perspective is changing the conversation with good people who've just gotten off in a ditch somewhere and they are not thinking correctly. So that's what I would encourage you to do. I think be the noticer. Be Andy Andrews in whatever town you're in, and notice people that need a word of encouragement and say it to them, or email it to them, or FaceTime with them. Do that. So that's enough preaching on my part, but let me pray for us. Father, in the name of Jesus, I ask you to give us the mind of Christ, in the hands and the feet of Jesus, and the love of Jesus for this world that is hurting. Lord, may we stand like cities on a hill that cannot be hidden, and may we bring hope to this world, not for our fame, not for our glory, but for the glory of God and the expansion of the kingdom in a time when the world is looking for answers. For I ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you. Thank you guys so much for being here. And next time I'll try to figure out if it's Dawson Northwest, Dawson No, or Dawson Ow. So
Ow.
thank you, Andy. Y'all have a great day. God bless.
Thanks, guys.